So I'd like now to introduce Barry, and Barry to give his presentation.
That's okay. Okay, good morning, folks. Energy and Rural Development Specialist with Teagasc. So I work out of the Longford office generally. I've been in the area of renewable energy for a number of years now with Teagasc. There's quite a bit of interest in it, and this has been a real slow burn, this area of anaerobic digestion and biogas over the last number of years. It hasn't really exploded to the level that we had expected at this stage in terms of meeting energy targets, in terms of all the benefits it can deliver at farm level and for society as well. Sean already went through the whole process of AD itself. So it's a biological process. It's breaking down organic manures. In the absence of oxygen, it's converting it into biogas. And then you're producing digestate at the end of it as well, which is a valuable fertilizer which can be used on farms as well. And obvious the requirement to bring in chemical fertilizer in many cases. So the process begins when organic materials or waste, as animal manures or food waste, or crop residues, they're fed into the sealed digestion tank there that you can see on the top. And inside the tank, you get this naturally occurring microorganisms, and they're decomposing the organic material through a series of stages. So initially it's hydrolysis, and it's breaking down the complex organic compounds into simple molecules. And these simpler molecules can then be converted into fatty acids. And it's through a process called acidogenesis, and the bacteria there. And next, the ketogenic bacteria, they come into play then, and they're breaking down the fatty acids into acetic acid, hydrogen and carbon dioxide. And finally, you have the methanogen bacteria producing the methane gas. So the biogas produced can be harnessed as a renewable energy. It can be sourced for generating electricity, generating heat. So our CHP, combined heat and power, as the terminology is often referred to. So I suppose at the outset here, maybe some of you are still not aware of what this whole process is about in terms of EIP, European Innovation Partnership, and what this project was about when it was initiated. A number of years ago at EU level, the European Commission decided that it was a good idea to get more farmers and multi-actors involved in research, that very often research is top-down rather than bottom-up. And this is a new way of doing research at EU level. So in Pillar 2 of the Common Agricultural Policy, so every country across Europe has to designate a certain amount of money to what's called Pillar 2 schemes under their rural development programmes. And Ireland is no different in that regard. So there was a call in all the different countries to see what kind of bottom-up approaches could be developed in terms of operational groups, whereby multi-actors would come together to solve a problem at farm level with the farmer at the core of all of that. So these operational groups have sprung up all across Europe now, and they're multi-actor approaches where you have farmers, advisors, researchers, people from industry, all coming together to solve a problem on those farms. All across Europe, there's about 3,000 of these operational groups doing research on farms at the moment. So it's a new way of doing research. It's not really research that's going to be done in universities or Teagasc centres that doesn't always get out there, and that people will learn from. The idea is that on a day like today, that you learn from what happens on Brendan's farm, and the Gobeen story, that you hear all about that, the challenges. Sometimes research works, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes research will tell you it just can't happen, or sometimes research will tell you it can happen if you do X, Y, and Z. I think that's what this is about, because as Sean said at the outset, we all talk about the larger projects, the 40 gigawatt hour plants, the larger biomethane plants, but this is to explore what is the role of this smaller scale digestion on farms. And this is the problem, that it doesn't work unless there's some kind of subvention, but there are benefits to this in certain situations where it can work and where it can deliver societal benefits as well. So why should we be considering, like all the emphasis at the moment right across the globe is on sustainable agriculture. It's about reducing emissions, climate friendly. And this is where EU policy and Irish policy targets are are there to drive this. And there's a lot of it's mentioned in a lot of reports like Acclimatise, Food Vision 2020. So there's a lot of policy targets that have to be achieved, and there's European Union targets such as the EU Green Deal and RED 2 and RED 3. That's the Renewable Energy Directive, where AD and biomethane, all of these technologies are being discussed within these documents as having an opportunity to reduce emissions within the agricultural sector and also help society as well, because agriculture is helping the energy sector to reduce its emissions also. So there's a lot of, we have a target there for net zero by 2050. So this is where this can feed into it as well. And of course, AD is not an intermittent technology. We have other renewables that are part of the jigsaw puzzle of technologies that can help us achieve our targets for 2030 and for net zero by 2050. Some of them are intermittent technologies like solar. You get energy when the sun is shining, wind. You get energy when the wind is blowing. But this is a continuous technology. You will be producing electricity, heat, 24/7 all year round. So it's a more continuous form of energy. And if anyone is looking for energy in their area, whether it's trying to encourage foreign direct investment or multinationals to invest in an area, they like to see a consistent supply of energy in an area and a strong grid in an area as well. And this is where this type of technology can boost all of that. So in terms of AD in Ireland, if we take a closer look at it, anaerobic digestion has been operational in niche areas across Europe since the 1970s. The technology has been recognised for its potential to convert organic waste into renewable energy. The biogas itself, so Noel talked about biogas itself being quite corrosive in its raw form, but in its raw form it contains typically about 55% methane and about 45% carbon dioxide. And this mixture can be combusted to produce heat, so it makes it a valuable resource for energy generation. And then you have since the 1990s, we've seen large-scale developments in the form of combined heat and power, or CHP. And these systems, they utilise biogas to produce both heat and electricity, so maximising the energy potential of the process. And then more recently, we've had biomethane that's come to prominence. So biomethane is purified form of biogas. You're taking that raw biogas and you're taking out the carbon dioxide, you're taking out the hydrogen sulfide and the water vapour, and you're purifying it into biomethane, which is the equivalent of the propane gas that's in the national gas grid. We have a lot of challenges with AD in Ireland, and one of the biggest ones that I put on top there is planning, or there's regulatory hurdles there. We have the regulatory framework around AD development is quite complex and it's sometimes inconsistent, and Sean mentioned that already, where you have different interpretations of it by different local authorities, and it just can make if the policies could be streamlined, and that's probably a recommendation that will be coming out of this report afterwards, is streamlining the policies around it, especially in the area. There's issues in terms of financial constraints. The initial capital investment for AD is quite significant. Even at the small scale, Sean and Noel give the figures earlier on there. Noel especially there. You're talking about between 400,000, maybe 500,000, even for a small scale digester, between 40, 50, 60 kilowatts. So it's quite a sizable investment at the outset. So it really all has to stack up. There's infrastructure limitations there at the moment. There's infrastructure in terms of the grid. The connecting back into the national grid can be quite tricky in certain areas of the country. So based on your geography, where you're located, that could determine whether a project is viable or not in an area. There may be significant reinforcement costs required if you're sending electricity back to the grid and if you don't have that capacity in your area. So, and feedstock availability, and I suppose the management of feedstock is quite critical as well. You have to ensure you have a consistent and sustainable supply of organic material for the AD plant, so you have to keep it fed all year round. If you don't it's like feeding a metal cow, and you have to keep it fed all year round. If you don't keep it fed, the bacteria will break down, and you have to recommission the plant again. So you have It's something that you're trying to avoid, and it's the kind of thing as well that investors look for. If banks or financial institutions, that's one of the key things they will look for in an AD plant is, can you prove to us, have you contracts in place, can you feed it from your own land, or do you have to outsource it from other farmers? Do you have contracts there in place to keep that animal fed all year round? The technology itself, you have wet systems and you have dry systems. The wet systems, they handle feedstocks with high moisture content, and they're typically slurries or liquid waste, and they're commonly used in agricultural settings. Then you have the drier systems. They're like, I suppose, garages. They're suited for feedstocks with lower moisture content, such as solid organic wastes, and those drier systems are often used for the digestion of crop residues or municipal solid waste. Then in terms of the temperature ranges, they're operating at different temperatures. You have the mesophilic and the thermophilic. So the temperature plays a very crucial role in the efficiency and the whole AD process. The mesophilic systems, they operate between 25 and 45 degrees Celsius. They're generally more stable and they require less energy input. So it makes them very suited for small-scale operations. And then the thermophilic systems, they operate at higher temperatures, between 50 and 60 degrees Celsius. So these systems can have faster degradation and breakdown. I mentioned at the start, so over what you feed into the digester, over 90% of what you feed into the digester will come back out the other end as digestate. So this is something that some people find is a problem in dealing with it, but it's a very valuable nutrient and a very valuable fertilizer that can be put back onto agricultural land. So it's the residue of the feedstocks, and while it might be considered a waste product, it actually holds a very significant value. And I have a slide in that after a while to put a value on the digestate in terms of the nutrient source and the nutrient value in it as well. So it's a replacement for artificial fertilizer. So it's one of the key benefits of the digestate is its ability to replace artificial fertilizers, because it does contain N, P and K, your nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. So by using the digestate, farmers can reduce their reliance on synthetic inputs. And I suppose that's quite significant in terms of Brendan's case, because Brendan is an organic farmer, and nutrient is very, very important on an organic farm where you can't apply chemical fertilizers. So I suppose that's the innovation I would see in a lot of this project as well, because we have a big challenge here in terms of increasing our organic farms across the country to 10% of the agricultural area by 2030 as part of our climate action plan. So that is a challenge that we have to achieve within agriculture. Big challenge is the nutrient. How do we grow tillage crops in organic situations? So if we have organically produced digestate that can go back onto agricultural crops, it can help the tillage industry expand. It can help those dairy farmers to produce the grass that they want in a more consistent way, and you have a more consistent fertilizer. You also get reduced odour. You get a higher nutrient availability as well, because you get an uplift in the nitrogen. So you get about a 10-11% higher uplift in your nitrogen. So that means that it is in the ammonia form, which means you have to be more careful how you land spread it. So it has, when you put it back onto agricultural land, you cannot splash plate it on, because you're going to create more problems in terms of ammonia emissions. So you do have to direct inject it into the soil, or use a trailing shoe to minimise any emissions in that situation. You do get reduced odour as well, which is an advantage, that the odour from the digestate is generally not as strong as that you get from raw manure or other organic fertilisers. And it also kills pathogens and weed seeds as well. So the nutrients in the digestate, nutrients in the digestate, particularly the nitrogen, is more freely available. The research would suggest that the nitrogen availability gets an uplift of around 10%, as I mentioned. To maximise the benefits of digestate, sufficient storage facilities are very, very important here. So proper storage ensures that the nutrients are preserved until the time that they can be applied on the agricultural land. So as you know, there is a closed period under the nitrates directive when manures can't be applied to agricultural land. So this is where the storage within the storage of the digestate would be quite important as well. What's also important is access to land bank. Many of the larger projects, that's one of the things that they're looking at is, and that investors will be looking at as well, is there access to a land bank to spread the digestate? How many tonnes of digestate will be produced? And is there contracts with local farmers to take this digestate at certain times of the year as well? In terms of small-scale AD, they can be monitored remotely using mobile phones. It's one of the advantages of small-scale systems that you can monitor it remotely, so it can be done through your phones. They're automated systems, so it just simplifies the process and the maintenance. So if something is wrong with your plant, you can see it on your phone that there's a breakdown. It's very important to have a consistent supply of slurry. It's essential for the successful operation of the system. Regular input of organic materials. It's often said to feed them little, but often. And finally, the small-scale AD systems need a year-round steady energy demand to maximise the benefits of the biogas production. So you do need an energy demand on site. So it is key that it doesn't suit every farm, to put it, if you don't have that energy demand on site. Grid connection is so. Even though you might have a significant proportion of the electricity generated by combined heat and power, you have to have a good grid connection in the area, and you do have to apply to ESB networks to get your grid connection. Even though you might use a lot of the electricity on site, you still have to make ESB networks aware of the fact that you are producing electricity on site and connecting into the grid. So there can be limited capacity issues in certain areas, so it's important to be aware of that. A technical assessment will be required to see how big you can get in terms of the generation capacity, because there's no point in oversizing the system if you can't get it back to the grid. And you may discover that poles have to be put in a certain area, maybe pylons, and that the cost of it is prohibitive to make the project viable. So these are the things that need to be considered if you are going down the CHP route of generating that electricity. The planning permission, then that's another crucial step in establishing a grid connection. So that process can be complex and it can be time consuming. It requires careful navigation, and it was mentioned already that there's different interpretations in different local authorities as to the acceptance of planning AD for planning in certain areas. There can be objections, and in many situations the objections can be to, I suppose, a lack of knowledge. People don't understand the technology, and they're afraid it's an incinerator or something that's, so probably there needs to be a large education and training of the public in this technology. This is a normal technology right across Europe, and it's something not to be afraid of. I just said I put up the typical yields that you get from grass silage, hybrid rye silage, energy beet, maize silage. So these are the energy crops that potentially could be grown to supplement where you don't have enough manure to keep a digester fed all year round. I suppose one of the challenges that we have in Ireland is that many of our cattle go out on grass for the summer. We try and minimise the winter inside. So if we can get away with a 16, a 20, a 24-week winter, we'll try and do that. So cattle will be out. It's cheaper to feed cattle outside on grass than to have them housed inside indoors. But that's one of our natural advantages in Ireland, to be able to do that. So we won't have that consistent supply of slurry under the animal in a shed if they're out on grass. So that can be a challenge in terms of feeding these digesters all year round. So they may need to be supplemented with these energy crops at certain times of the year. So it is, this is nothing, this is no innovation in this. This is something that has been proven across Europe, and Germany has over 9,000 agricultural digesters at this stage. Many other countries like Italy and Denmark have gone down this route. So we know what they can produce in terms of the output and megawatt hours per hectare based on the yield and the tonnage per hectare from these various energy crops. So the benefits of small-scale biogas here, capturing additional, I suppose firstly the small-scale AD systems, they allow us to capture the value in the form of the energy from the waste. It provides less exposure to volatile energy markets, because You have energy security on the farm. You're producing your own energy. The farms, they can become more self-sufficient and less reliant on externally sourced energy. I suppose another significant benefit is the reduction of the fugitive methane emissions from livestock. So these are the societal benefits that I spoke about earlier on, that something that should be paid for in terms of reducing emissions on farms, and is helping us meeting our target of reducing emissions within the agricultural sector as well. And you're also helping the energy sector reduce their emissions by providing a renewable source of energy for them. It aligns also with regenerative farming. Regenerative farming, it's not organic farming, but it's more environmentally friendly type farming. So it supports sustainable agricultural practices by recycling nutrients, and you're enhancing soil health as well. And you're reducing the carbon footprint as well. I think we will see in the future carbon footprints and carbon labelling going on a lot of food products. You will see have your litre of milk will have grams of CO2 per litre of milk. You'll have your pound of butter with grams of CO2 per as well. So, and there'll be a lot of pressures coming on processors to do that. And this is where most of the emissions are happening on the farm. And this is an opportunity to reduce those emissions on the farms by, I suppose, encouraging the farmers to have more sustainable ways of producing their own energy, and that they're also sending green electricity back to the grid as well. Which farms are suitable, or farmers are suitable for AD? Noel went through a lot of this earlier on about poultry and some of the wedge issue with poultry, and you get the 6-7 cycles on poultry units, and you don't have that continuous demand all the time for the energy, and there can be waste heat at certain times of the year. That can be a challenge, So, they suit where you're running 24/7. There are farms that are, I suppose, have a continuous demand, continuous operation. Dairy farmers as well, they might have a very low base load, and at certain times of the day you can be producing your electricity, and you might have to, the cows are out grazing on grass. All you have is your bulk tank running, so there may be certain times of the day you don't have a large electricity demand. Can you get the excess electricity back to the grid at those times of the day? Can you store it in batteries? These are the kind of things that need to be considered in all of this, and you draw off the batteries at certain times, and there's other things that could be done there as well. If you had year-round cattle housing, that would help, because you'd be a consistent supply of slurry all year round. So I think the consistent livestock presence, that's why it works in a lot of other European countries. I know in the southwest of Germany they brought in a scheme supporting sub 75 kilowatt digesters, but that was an intensive livestock region, and that's where that's why, and most of the cattle will be housed there all year round. They had that consistent supply of slurry all year round. One of the conditions of that scheme that they had in the Baden-Württemberg area of Germany was that it had to be over 90% manure going into those digesters. So that they had that supply all year round because cattle were housed all year round. And I suppose that electricity generation capacity, you're talking about, it might be vary from 20 to maybe 75 kilowatts. That type of a generation capacity would be required as well to meet where you're looking at that kind of energy demand. In terms of connecting to the grid, there's two forms there's a number of forms that can be filled out for ESB networks. So if you're going down to small scale generation, or micro generation as it's called, you're filling out what's called your NC6 form, and that's a simple inform and fit process with ESB networks. When you move bigger than that, you're into what's called mini generation. And mini generation is up to 17 kVA back to the transformer at single phase, potentially if you have the transformer capacity. And then moving up to 50 kilowatts, you could be 50 kVA back to your transformer at 3 phase. So that may suit this type of system for small scale generation. If you're going bigger than that, you're maybe it's an NC7 form that you have to submit in that situation if you're going at mini generation level. So I suppose the whole process of getting electricity back to the grid has been simplified over the last 2 years with the micro generation and the mini generation policies that have been introduced by ESB networks. But that doesn't mean it's still going to be easy to get the electricity back to the grid, because you may discover that you won't be able to get 17 kVA back at single phase or 50 kVA back at 3 phase, because the transformer capacity just isn't good enough in your area. So you may have to go with what is there in your area, what your existing transformer capacity, because you may discover if you want to upgrade the grid, upgrade the transformer capacity, you might have a sizable bill to pay to ESB networks with poles and infrastructure into the area. So there's the things to consider. When grid connection can be a thorny issue on this area. If you're in a rural area and you're trying to, based on your geography, you may discover that it's just, I have to downsize my generation capacity because I just can't get it back to the grid and it costs too much to upgrade the grid in the area. I just wanted to introduce you, so I talked about micro generation, I talked about mini generation, and then above that you probably heard of the RES scheme, the Renewable Electricity Support Scheme, or RES. That's for the 500 kilowatt plus connecting to the grid. That's the larger scale projects. A lot of the wind projects, the solar projects that are going to be delivered over the coming years to meet our 2030 targets and beyond are funded through RES. So RES is essentially a support mechanism for large projects of wind, solar. Biogas really doesn't work under it because the support levels that are there for under RES don't really suit biogas, because it's a higher subvention that will be needed for this particular technology. It works for wind, it works for solar, but the RES scheme doesn't work for AD, CHP. But they're much larger projects. But there is going to be a new scheme introduced in the coming weeks, months. We've been waiting for this for a while. It's between micro generation level or mini generation level and RES level. So it's called SRES, or Small Scale Renewable Electricity Support Scheme, SRES as it's referred to. So this scheme potentially, if there could be a policy mechanism introduced here that would support small scale generation, support the electricity price, that if the market rate of electricity goes below a certain level, that it will be topped up to a level that would make it viable for the operator, for the investor in it, to make it economically viable. So it's really been developed around solar and wind, but there is a potential in this small scale renewable electricity support scheme to have the electricity price for biogas supported to a level that makes it economically viable. So I just wanted to make you aware of that scheme. There's a lot of information online about it. There's been stakeholder consultation about this. The scheme still has to be rolled out. The terms and conditions haven't been published yet, but there will be a price point set that if take solar or wind, if the price goes below a certain level in terms of cent per kilowatt hour or euro per megawatt hour, that it'll be topped up by government if the market rates go. But the reality is, at the moment, there's such a demand for green electricity. You have all these data centres at the moment that are being built across the country. They require a lot of green electricity as part of their planning. And as part of that, they will, you have a lot of the utilities that you could be selling your electricity back, who will buy it off you at a premium price, because they will sell it on to the likes of a data centre who needs it as part of their planning requirements. So these are the opportunities here, I suppose, that you mightn't even need to fall back on a price that's within a small scale renewable electricity scheme, that this green electricity could command a good price in its own right without having to get a topped up price through a government support initiative. So these are the technologies that are included in the small scale renewable electricity support scheme. They've been all mentioned in it, like hybrid wind and solar projects, hydro, high efficiency combined heat and power, biomass fueled high efficiency combined heat and power, and biogas fueled high efficiency CHP. So it is mentioned within the report, within the stakeholder consultation. I suppose it's a matter, for industry to get behind this, and to, if it's felt that this particular technology can deliver in terms of all the things I mentioned there a while ago, that that a price point is set, what would be needed to make it economically viable on the electricity side. So I'm going to finish up with renewable heat. So you have, the main supports that are out there. The renewable heat obligation, that's, a key initiative That's going to play, or the RHO, as it's often referred to, that's going to place a mandate on the heat sector to incentivise the use of renewable fuels. So that obligation is set to begin sometime in 2025, and that should significantly increase the adoption of renewable energy sources in heating anyways. What's there at the moment is the support scheme for renewable heat. Some of you that are involved in biomass, that area will be very familiar with it in terms of wood chip, wood pellets. So the SSRH supports anyone that has put in a wood chip boiler, a wood pellet boiler, is supporting that sector for the last couple of years. Since 2019 it was actually introduced. And the scheme, it's open to farmers, or a lot of pig farmers have put in biomass boilers to it as well, but AD hasn't really, there is, AD is supported in it as well. There is a tariff section for it within the terms and conditions of the scheme. So the SSRH also provides a 40% grant for the installation of air, water source, ground source heat pumps, and some farmers have actually put in those as well. They're the tariffs that have been set there. You can see on the right hand side there for renewable heat. There's tiered categories. So it's the column on the extreme right is the one for AD. The one just before that on the left is for biomass heating systems. So you can see there what was introduced is a tiered payment system, tier 1, tier 2. So the more you the more you burn, the less you get paid, or the more you produce, the less you get paid. So the SSRH does provide for the heating side of AD. It can be quite tricky on a lot of farms to use the heat. Very often in rural areas, do you have a demand for the heat? So Noel was talking about the example there a while ago of having the nursing home beside where the digester is, and that you can pipe the heat into it. That you could pipe the heat into the nursing home. That's a great use of the heat. If there was a hotel or a hospital or a nursing home, some building with large heat and hot water demand, that would be ideal for sending the heat off there. It's something to be thinking about when you're doing CHP, combined heat and power. What are you going to use the heat for? What are you going to use, and can you get the electricity back to the grid? There are key considerations in this. So I'm just going to finish off with the biomethane. So the biomethane is the one that the larger systems, the one that everyone is talking about at the moment, and we have a target there set in the Climate Action Plan of 5.7 terawatt hours of biomethane gas in the grid by 2030, and that'll probably lead to the construction of around 200 to 250 biogas plants to meet our targets there by 2030. But there's a long lead-in time for these plants, so I think it's very ambitious to be, to be achieving that at this stage, because there will be planning issues, there will be regulatory issues in terms of achieving that between now and 2030. The only policy instrument that's been mentioned here about this is the renewable heat obligation, the RHO. A lot of industry experts feel that it falls short of providing the necessary confidence or certainty for investors in this particular area. And we have an interim target of 1 terawatt hour by 2025. But we do have a strategy. We do have a biomethane strategy that was introduced this year, and I think it was May of this year. So there is a biomethane strategy at the moment as regards how we're going to, what we want to achieve, and and that there will be support mechanisms put in place for this as well. So there is a bit of traction happening on the biomethane side. So these are much larger plants. That you could be talking about over 100,000 tons of feedstocks going into these plants on a yearly basis, using a lot of grass silage. So there could be 120,000 hectares of grass silage being fed into these digesters in the coming year. So I suppose that's a diversification opportunities for farmers as well, is to supply grass silage into these digesters on a contractual basis, and it's a land use alternative for those farmers. Okay, so AD offers significant benefits, and they're not currently financially viable without the appropriate supports. So I think to help reduce emissions through improved manure management, and to decrease the electrical import requirement needs on farms, and to generate heat on site as well, it will require some level of subvention and support. So I think that's where, for Irish conditions, and it'll be different on every farm, but we need to have, get that into this final report as well, as regards what is needed to make this economically viable on Irish farms. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Barry, for your presentation, and you covered a wide range of topics and areas there. So again, if you have any questions, please keep them. We will come to them in a couple of minutes.